even tariffs have rules. The court strike down the vast majority of President Trump's import tax, just the latest in a string of legal losses for the president's agenda.
Plus, a former Trump cabinet official is set to face fiery questions from Congress on the Jeffrey Epstein case, what we could learn from Alex Acosta.
And later, Trump eyes Chicago, how the Windy City prepares for a possible federal crackdown like the one we saw in D.C.
Welcome back to the Weekend Primetime. We begin this hour with breaking news, the latest setback in court for President Trump and his immigration agenda. Just hours ago, a federal judge halted the administration from deporting more than 600 Guatemalan children in the dead of night to their home country, some of whom were orphans and survivors of abuse. This brand new video, courtesy of KVEO, shows a plane on a tarmac in Texas with some of those children on board. At one point, you can see people getting off the plane and buses being driven away. Efrain Olveiras, Vice President of Litigation at the National Immigration Law Center, whose team filed the emergency request that stopped these deportations, joined us earlier this evening. Take a listen.
These are children. And what kind of country have we become that the most powerful and rich country in the world is targeting 7-year-olds, orphan 10-year-olds, and preventing them from having the chance to present their case in front of a judge?
Joining us now are Lydia DePillis, economics reporter for the New York Times, and Danny Savalos, MSNBC legal analyst and criminal defense attorney. Danny, that was just insanity that you had around 600 children, underage minors, according to reports of what happened, who in the middle of the night, a federal judge had to stop their removal from the United States, some of the children orphaned, some survivors of abuse, in the dead of night on a holiday weekend. What do you make of how it got shut down, what the DOJ called a pilot program with Guatemala, and what do you see happening next?
Just as a practitioner, what jumps out at me about a lot of these situations is just how fast some of these litigants have to move to avoid complete disaster. And we live in an era, at least for attorneys, of electronic filing and word processing and being able to cut and paste and type and file things relatively quickly. And I wonder if we were dealing with these same issues just 15 years ago, in an era when e-filing was really still at the beginning. How would any of this even work when you, in an era where you still had to run down to the courthouse with a stack of paper and get it stamped or drop it off in the mailbox overnight over the weekend, which I remember doing? I mean, a lot of these children would already have been gone. I mean, there just would be no remedy. And I know the question is more, how shocking is it? Yes, it is. But that's what I just keep thinking about, I guess, as a practitioner. There are attorneys out there who are challenging these removals and have to do so at breakneck speed, whether it's Kilmar Abrego Garcia's attorneys scrambling to file, not only file, but file in the right jurisdiction where he's being held, or in situations like this where you have to file, as you said, overnight, and judges are dealing with this overnight. I think the modern federal judge has to realize that taking the job means it's a 24-hour-a-day job. It's not just a 9-to-5 job like it might have been back in the 80s.
Lydia, Trump has had a lot of legal setbacks with him trying to fire Lisa Cook. I'm wondering if where this is now and how you think this is going to affect, because these, it's a pause, but he's lost in court with the tariffs too. So there's sort of a real sense that everything he's trying to do in this is kind of illegal. So I'm wondering what you think his next move will be.
Well, I think that Trump has proven over and over again that what he does is negotiate with the courts. He takes out a maximalist position, gets knocked back, tries something else, tries a different way, moves around it, and ultimately he has ended up moving the ball further and further down the field in his direction. So I don't think anyone should see this as the end of the tariff story. What happened on Friday, obviously, was a big setback, probably expected in the legal community because the case is pretty clear cut here. But it is one that he reacted to immediately in extreme terms, saying that the future of the country depends on these tariffs going forward, et cetera, et cetera. And that is because it is one of his only tools of diplomacy, one of his only tools to raise money. And so that's why he sees it as existential and will pursue it in whatever way he can.
Danny, where do you see the Supreme Court falling on this case when October 14th, I believe, is when they've set the deadline, mid-October. There's a stay until then, so his policy is still intact. But how do you see this going when it goes to the highest court in the land?
It's complicated, but the Supreme Court has a number of tools at its disposal if it wants to essentially slow walk this case or create a lot of time. Not necessarily that they even want to, but a lot of different options that they take could result in delay. I mean, it's already being sent back, as you said, being delayed until October. We're very early in this Trump presidential term, but this will at least, arguably, they could delay it to the midterms. They could delay it to many different significant points. And you'll recall that during the era of his criminal prosecutions, the court was able, in some ways, to create some time and space until stretching that out inured to his benefit. And here we are, 4 prosecutions later, only one ever went to trial, and that was a state court prosecution where he was found guilty. So in terms of the Supreme Court, they can do a lot of different things to affect that delay, and especially the fact that it's already being sent back down procedurally, and stayed, it's going to create some delay in addition to that.
All right, welcome to the weekend prime time, and we're going to jump right into our top story this evening. Breaking tonight, yet another major legal setback against Donald Trump's extreme immigration policies, all of it playing out in the dark of night with nothing less than the lives of hundreds of children at stake. A federal judge temporarily blocked the administration from deporting more than 600 Guatemalan children back to their home country, several of whom have even expressed fear about returning. Now, the suit was filed in the middle of the night by immigrant advocacy groups. The New York Times reports, quote, in its 25-page complaint, the National Immigration Law Center said that the children had active cases before immigration courts across the country and that their repatriation would violate the law and the Constitution. It also called the government's actions unlawful and reckless. Throughout Trump's time in politics, he has repeatedly claimed that his immigration crackdown is about going after the worst of the worst. But let me just read you the background of one of the plaintiffs in this case, a 10-year-old indigenous girl identified only by the initials LGML. She speaks a rare language. She's detained at a children's shelter in Texas. Her mother is deceased, and she suffered abuse and neglect from other caregivers. And our government was about to put her on a plane and ship her off to a completely different country. This is who the Trump administration wants you to believe are the worst of the worst. Joining us now is Efrain Olivares, the Vice President of Litigation at the National Immigration Law Center. His team filed that emergency request that stopped these deportations. Efrain, it's great to have you on the show. Thank you for making time for us tonight. We understand that you have stayed up over the last 24 hours working on this case. Just talk to us a little bit about what happened here. How did you find out about this, and how did you proceed to file the paperwork necessary to get this court order to stop? As we understand it, some of these children, I believe, were already on the plane getting ready to take off from Texas when the decision was made for them not to be deported.
Good evening. It's great to be with you all. I hope we're under different circumstances and for different reasons. But yes, my team and I and dozens of advocates across the country were up all night as ICE agents and their contractors were showing up at shelters in Texas, in Arizona, and other parts of the country, trying to pick up children with 2 hours notice, 3 hours notice in the middle of the night and send them to Guatemala. Children who had pending asylum claims, open immigration cases. We heard about this from the legal service providers, the attorneys for the children in their immigration proceedings, who started seeing odd things happen, particularly to Guatemalan children. For example, the calendar hearings that they had for next week, for next month, all of a sudden disappeared from the calendar. They just dropped. And that's a sign when a child is about to be removed. So that started to happen to dozens of Guatemalan children. So people started sounding the alarm, comparing notes, and that's why we got here.
Efrain, the timing here is pretty unbelievable. Sunday morning of Labor Day weekend, a government lawyer's quoted in Politico calling this, a first launch of a pilot program. What was the government's intention here, trying to do this in the dead of night on a holiday weekend?
The government's position at the hearing today was that this is nothing other than repatriation. Reuniting children with their parents is what they claim, at the request of their parents in Guatemala, and that this had been going on for weeks, had been in the works, and the planning had happened. The judge was very quick to call the government out that if that were true, why were they doing this in the middle of the night with 2 hours notice and rushing to get the children onto those planes? That's why we had to file this complaint at 1 o'clock this morning, call the court's emergency line, try to get a judge on the line, get an emergency ruling, which we got around 4:30 in the morning, and still children were put on planes. And that's what led us to seek further relief from the court and had a hearing today at 12:30 where the judge finally halted all removals of all Guatemalan children in ORR custody for 14 days.
Can you talk us through how unusual this is to deport children, minors, by themselves back to, because it strikes me that this is so unbelievably cruel and shockingly cruel. I wonder if you could talk about that.
At the opening, Eamon showed a description of our 10-year-old client. There was a 7-year-old client.
The legal defeats keep coming. And again, it really needs to be said, these are not like technical little losses. Presidents lose in court. Even the good ones, even the best ones. FDR, LBJ, when they still lost. Lincoln, they probably all lost in court at some point, right? But like this rhetoric that you're seeing is like the judges aren't just saying, "Oh, look, Mr. Trump, you lost on a technicality. I'm sorry. I just disagree with your interpretation of subsection 7.25, subsection C of this particular law. I actually side with this other interpretation. So I'm gonna no. These you are violating fundamental rights and procedures in unconscionable ways." The judges are furious with what they're seeing. They're alarmed and furious and insulted with the arguments. These are not routine smackdowns. The judges here are not simply saying we disagree or saying to them, look, you could come back with a law that was structured slightly differently, and that might well actually be constitutional. You just need to do X, Y, and Z. But as it stands, it does not meet my interpretation of the law, right, and of the Constitution. The judges here are crushing him because in court, sometimes it matters, yes, whether you win or lose, but sometimes it matters how you win or lose, how badly the judge smacks you down, because that informs not only what higher level courts might say and do, but it also indicates to the public how little you regard your responsibility as president. That you're not just trying your best and you passed a law that just doesn't fit, but that you're willfully and repeatedly trying to pass laws that spit on the American people and their rights.